And I said, do you have paid vacation? I said, do you have paid sick days? Do you have health benefits? Do you have a retirement policy? Yes, 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 and yes. And I said, you're lucky. And it's the grass is greener.
Right.
There's always a trade-off for all of this being able to do what I want to do as a job. There are trade-offs. And that people who sacrifice, maybe they don't feel as fulfilled with what they do for a living, but there are other things that they're getting out of it.
Welcome back to Puppeteers. I'm your host, Adam Krutinger. Here we have Cameron Garrity back as our co-host.
Hey, everybody. Happy New Year.
And today, for our first episode of the new year,
Woo!
we have David Stevens. Welcome,
David. You and me? No, it's me.
Probably.
I'm the guest. He just happens to be here.
Well, thank you both.
It's me. I'm going to talk about my career as a Chubbly.
And Chubbly, what exactly are you? Are you a monster, or are you just your own species?
I guess I'm a monster. I don't really know.
Yeah. Or is Chubbly the species?
I'm
He's
Chubbly.
Chubbly named Chubbly.
Hi, Cam. Hi, Adam.
Cheers.
Nice to meet you.
Hi. Okay, I'll leave now. Bye-bye.
I'm sure he'll be back.
Yeah,
More than likely.
yeah. Well, I'm so excited to have you on because I know I talked about you a little bit during when we had Derek Lux on, and I know I've commented.
Oh, great.
Yeah. In the tutorial Q&A forum that I have, I bring you up every once in a while because I think you are a great example of someone. I get the question all the time. We've talked about it many times.
Yeah.
People saying, I want to be a puppeteer. How do I do it? And I always reference you and Derek as great examples of that because you are people that make your own opportunities.
Yeah, and some of that's definitely born out of necessity. I know growing up, I grew up in South Alabama where there just were not that many given opportunities to do this, so I sort of had to find my own. And because this was something I was interested in, even though most of the people around me weren't, this was the sort of thing that if I wanted to pursue it, I was going to have to do it. And so I just did.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, and your company, for those who don't know, is All Hands Productions. And when did that come about?
So I went through the master's program at University of Connecticut, and I graduated in 2001. And after I graduated, I returned to Alabama and sort of started All Hands Productions officially then. I'd been doing shows under a different company name before then. So like all through college, I was functioning basically as a professional puppeteer in the technical sense of getting paid to do shows. That's what a professional is. And so when I got out of grad school, that's when All Hands Productions really started in earnest.
And just for people who are listening, the master's program that you mentioned is a master's in puppetry.
Correct. The University of Connecticut offers both undergrad and graduate degrees in puppet arts. It's sort of under the umbrella of the dramatic arts department, but it is very much its own thing. So I went there as a master's student 99 to 2001.
And now we talked to Jeanne Marie Keevans earlier last year, who talked about the program a little bit. But who were some of your contemporaries when you were there?
Well, let's see. When I was there, Jason Hines, who's the head of the puppet shop at the Center for Puppetry Arts, he was there. Hua Zhang was there. Sarah Frechette was there. Kaylee Clemens. I'm trying to think who else. Kathy McCullough, Deb Hertzberg, who are still really good friends. Matt Leonard, he was there. There was a whole bunch of people that are still involved in puppetry who were both undergrad and graduate students.
Definitely. Yeah, so you maybe just missed Jeanne Marie then, because I think she said she was there with Hua and Kaylee and some of those folks. So
yeah,
great.
I think so. Yeah, I wasn't there. We weren't there together. I think there was a little, we were passing ships.
Yeah. That's great. Well, what are you working on right now? We'll certainly go back to the stuff later, but what projects do you have going on right now?
Well, 2018 was a big year in that I created a new show called The Pied Picker. This was a show that was funded in part by the Jim Henson Foundation under a family grant. And so that was created early part of 2018, and then I toured it extensively during the summer. So some of that is carrying over into 2019. I'm doing a lot of banjo stuff these days, which is kind of a sideline to the puppet stuff. But then, yeah, the first part of the year is always booking the rest of the year. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now. So
I hear that. Now, when you traveled, do you travel with multiple shows so that you could do different performances, or when you're committed, you're doing something like Pied Pickler all through the season?
it depends. Really, the show is decided by the sponsor, the client who's hiring me. So sometimes I'll have multiple shows packed at one time, depending on where I'm traveling to. But a lot of times, especially in the summer when I'm doing summer reading programs, I'm at a regional system for like a whole week. So I'll go to Mobile, Alabama, and I'll do 13 shows in 5 days, and it'll be the same show for that week. But then the next week I could be in Charleston, South Carolina doing a different show, but it would be the same show for that whole stretch of shows. But yeah, so, and any of the shows that I make are available at any time. So really once I build a show, it goes into my repertoire and is available so people can book it, whatever. So I think I have about 7 or 8 shows, and then I have a Christmas show that obviously gets booked in December. I don't really have a whole lot of calls for it in July, but but so, and it's nice that I have, it's one of those things that I build up a lot of repeat. So I have people that are libraries or schools or just clients who book me year in and year out. And it's nice that once I have, now that I have a stable of shows, that we can go 8 years before we cycle through them again.
Right.
So that's at least a couple of generations of kids who have aged, baby to 5, that would not have seen a repeat show.
Yeah,
that's great.
How much do you have to brush up much at all when you bring back an old show, or do you kind of have little cheat sheets? I'm sure
it depends,
because I imagine
Christmas
those shows are pretty detailed and extravagant. And you play all the characters. Actually, I just got to mention this quick. I remember the first time I ever saw you perform, and it was so inspiring. I was at the P of A at Swarthmore. What year was that?
Swarthmore was 2013.
2013.
That's right.
And I saw the Reluctant Dragon, and I'm just and I didn't. I think I knew who you were at that point, but I didn't know it was you. I just walked into this dragon show. Well, of course, it said your name on the thing. I'm watching this. I'm like, man, what a great show is this? I'm like, what a good idea. I said, I want to do something like this. I want to have a pre-recorded track show with just a couple puppeteers doing a little show like this. And then at the end, when you walked out, it was just you. And I was like, he did that all himself? I'm like, well, since it's pre-recorded. Then I found out that you were doing all those voices live. It was absolutely flawless. I could not believe it. And it's the only thing a lot of my friends heard about for a long time. Because I was I just even looking back, I could not believe it. All the different voices, it was flawless.
Hearing about
it's all. I could not believe it. It was such a great show that you did all those characters by yourself. I swear there was like 4 puppets up at one time or something. That's probably just in my head. But yeah, oh my gosh, and all those voices, it was on point. It was really, really impressive.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've kind of worked the same way since I started. Just wrapping up the Christmas shows. The first time I did the Christmas show that I do was I think I was 19. I think it was developed in like 1996, around there. So I've been doing the same show, and it's really my stuff really hasn't changed, which kind of sounds bad. It's like for an artist you hope to grow and develop and do all these things. It's like, well, my stuff has been the same since I was a teenager, but in a good way. Like it's nice to sort of have that as a time capsule. I go back to that, and there's, even when I think about trying to change it or trying to do something new, or maybe this is not good, but there's still something about it that really speaks to audiences, and it speaks to me too. And I think that's, if I have a philosophy about any of this stuff, it's that the shows I make are really a dialogue with the audience. It's not just me doing a performance that they take in and have some sort of, response to as a spectator. It's not a spectator thing. It's really a communication between me, the story being told, the puppets, and the audience. Like that, I think at its best, that's what puppet theater does. It's a communicative tool that allows a dialogue between performer and audience. So it's nice to revisit that every year, to know that I caught on to that pretty early on, and as far as doing the live voices, I think there was a point when I tried to do. I know there was, because the first time I did a show at a Puppeteers of America festival was in 1993. Letty Schubert had contacted me, Frankie Cordero, and Kevin Menendez to be a part of a young performers workshop she was putting together. And so the three of us were sort of spotlit in this workshop she put together, so that because Letty definitely understood the importance of seeing where puppetry was going next, like the next generation. And so she assembled the three of us, and we got together. And the show I did was it was kind of a 20s gangster version of Brer Rabbit. It was very strange now that I look back at it. But I did all the voices, and I were music cues and all this stuff, and I did it pre-recorded, and it just didn't work for a lot of reasons. But the pre-recorded track just didn't have. It wasn't part of that dialogue. It was just. It was canned. I mean, quite literally. But it felt that way, and it didn't. It was not part of a dialogue. It was not asking the audience to be a part of this. Now, granted, I've seen some great shows. Tanglewood Marionettes and Kevin Frisch. They are exceptional puppeteers who work with a track and do so very effectively. And because of the style in which they work doing the marionettes that they do, it kind of warrants it, and it adds to the production. I've also seen some shows that I really wish had not been tracked. Or that would have been better served if they'd been done live. But there's just something about that live connection that lets the audience know that you're there with them, and that you are there, a present part of it. So very important to me that's part of what I do. And even though there are many times, especially when I get sick or my voice is not great, that I wish I had a track backup, and I don't, and I just have to kind of squeak my way through it as best I can. But still, I think even squeaked is better than pre-recorded.
Yeah. You kind of put your life in your own hands when you have that track, because you're kind of on a train, and you can't quite stop it if things start to go off rail.
Exactly, and that goes for on my end of things and on the audience end of things too.
Certainly.
If something is happening because I can't see anything if I'm not, sometimes I'm a visible part of the action, like I'm a character in some of the shows, but then for a lot of them I'm not, and there's no scrim, and I can't see what's going on in the audience. So if I have no cognizance of it, if I was running a track, I wouldn't be able to stop. So there is that luxury of, being able to go with it.
Absolutely. Now, I have a question about your setup, and we'll kind of show up a photo of it because you've shared what your backstage looks like before. But all your puppets sort of hang upside down, I imagine, so you could get your hands in the characters more easily. They're hung on hooks, very much like an old traditional puppet theater. Is that the same setup that you have for every show, or do you have different, I don't know, like pegboards to accommodate where puppets need to be, or the size of your characters, or anything like that? Or is it are each of your shows built to the specification of your main stage?
Yeah, so I use the same stage for all the shows. Different puppets, obviously, for the different shows that I do, but it's the same basic setup, and most of that is based on the fact that the spaces I go, and it's nice that we can predict each other. It's like, they know I need a 10 by 10 by 10 space to accommodate the basic stage that I have, which is a modified booth stage. I should give credit where it's due. It was designed and built by Roy Howington, who used to be the production manager at the Center for Puppetry Arts. I had a stage that was roughly the same thing. Like it had what's I like about mine is it has a curved playboard. It's sort of it's not flat straight across. It has a nice curve to it, which gives me a lot more playing area, I find. But he took the original stage that I have and modified the design and really streamlined it, made it slick. So that it looked a lot more professional. So I have to give him credit for that, for making it look good. But yeah, so I have backstage. I sit on a rolling stool, and I have 4 prop shelves that go along the curvature of the stage, and on each of those prop shelves are cup hooks that are attached underneath the lip of each of the shelves, and so all the puppets hang there. There is also, for Reluctant Dragon, I have these little ants that come in and out during transitions, and they hang on a separate part of the stage. There's a sort of lip, so the stage is 4 frames, and there's a playboard that rests on top of those 4 frames. And so right under the playboard on those frames, there are some hooks where I hang those ants. So I've developed, as I create each show, I find I need a different space to store or hang or whatever, and so modifications will be made as I go along, but it's all based on the same setup.
Got it.
Which
Very
is just
cool.
easier for transport, and it's easier for the spaces in which I go.
Oh, sure.
My mentor, Terry Snyder, he was a fantastic theatrical designer, and he had a different set for each show he did. And some were a booth stage, and then some were really environments that he would create. And I love those. I just didn't have that knack. Like, I didn't have that knack for theatrical design as it applied to the sets. I know that my strength is with character, developing characters and puppets, and that's really what my forte is. And the stage just kind of like I cheat and say it's a Stanislavski approach because it's towards a poor theater. It's you have to fill in the rest,
Right.
which is true. I like that, and because I think there's a lot of strength in inner character play and relationships and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And you can fill in the rest.
Yeah. Well, and the because of that curve, the whole set kind of looks like a giant magic hat. So I could imagine for little kids who see this thing come up to their library every year, you never know what kind of things you're going to pull out of it. Sometimes you might get a rabbit, but others, it's a reluctant dragon or a chubbly or whatever.
Sure. Well, and because they recognize it, I'll hear, because I can totally hear people when they're out there. I'll hear it's like, oh, this is the guy we like. So they recognize the stage, and even if it's the same show, I find that I'm doing different shows because the clients want to see something new, not because necessarily the audience wants to see something new. And it's very interesting in that, because we all know kids that they'll watch the same Disney movie 50 times and they won't get tired of it, and then they'll go back to it, but it seems like for the client's sake, the people that hire me every year, it's more for their sake that I'm doing a new show, or they want to see something new or whatever, not for the audience. I think the audience would be, that's why I have people that come and see my Christmas show that hasn't changed in 20 years. They'll come and see it over and over and over again because it's part of their tradition. It's kind of like Rudolph. People will watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer on television every Christmas because it's part of their tradition. And it's great that, some of my stuff has become like that to audience members. But the stage is definitely a recognizable, oh, it's that guy. In a positive way.
Yeah.
I guess it could be the other way too. Oh, it's that guy.
But they're not buying repeat tickets, so.
Right.
The other thing I like about your work is your puppets have, they look very classic, but also that you definitely have your own aesthetic. But one more thing I wanted to point out before we get too much into the building aspect is one thing I see about your puppets that I haven't seen before, I'm not sure if it's something you created, is the way that the arms are manipulated for your puppets. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. So for the live shows, because I'm doing multiple characters, or 2 characters at once, I don't have the luxury of being able to use rods during the live shows, even when I'm moving using Muppet style puppets. And I didn't want them to just hang dead. Now, this is not something I created. This is something that I'd seen done from other puppeteers. I know Terry used it at some point for various things, but there'd be a string that runs from the puppet's hand to somewhere, and Terry used to attach it right around the body, the top of the body. But it also meant that when you did that, it limited the range of motion of the hands. They were just kind of locked in place. So I sort of experimented with it and figured out that if I put it somewhere on the head, like around the temples or the cheeks or something, that I really had a broad range of motion to be able to use the hands. And it's not really anything I can control specifically, but it really has to do with gravity and the pendulum, really, because really, when I alter the pitch of my hand, it's going to change it's like Big Bird in a way, because, Big Bird has that one continuous string that runs from the live hand all the way up to his beak and then down to the dummy hand. And so you get this kind of motion. So it's the same idea, even though it's two different strings for each hand. But it's really the tilt of the head and the way I'm manipulating my hand and my arm and the way the puppet moves that also influence and affect the way that the arms move. And that's just to give the puppets a more natural movement. So really, even when they're not physically doing something, they still have a bit of life to them. Mm-hmm. And I like to add those things that have a kineticism about them, whether it's the hair or the costume or some part of it that still stays kind of moving, even when the puppets are, one is just directing its attention at the other one. So that was the reason for the arms.
From a performing standpoint, is it pretty straightforward to traditional monitor style, or do you have to actually change your technique because of the way it affects the rest of the body then? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
Do you have to like kind of think, okay, now I'm doing like this type of puppet? Do you have to like change your mental how would you phrase?
Yeah, well, for instance, when Adam and I we've done a couple live stage shows for pretty big concert halls and such, that we need to really exaggerate our performance and our manipulation because of now, even though you have a smaller stage and it's very intimate, are you doing larger, broader strokes because it's still a live performance and you don't have the monitor? Is that what you're?
Sure.
No, that's not at all what I was trying to say. I'm sorry.
Made sense to me.
I'm a little rusty. But no, that's a very good question. It makes a lot of sense. But I was still talking mostly in regard to again, the arms being controlled essentially by the head. Because when you're doing monitor puppetry and you have arm rods, it's a very different, I imagine, type of performance than what you're doing with that puppet, where not only is the mouth and lip sync controlled by the head, but now also the arms are all controlled with that one head. So I guess what I'm asking is, did you kind of have to relearn puppetry or reteach yourself a different style of puppetry, or is it pretty similar to you? Those two different styles.
It's pretty similar. I'm trying to think. I know in Reluctant Dragon there are a few moments. I have a character who's a knight named Sir Reginald Thwebes. And Sir Reginald has a sword attached to one of his hands. It's also strung to his head.
Yeah.
So when I want to get this motion, the whole thing it's not that I can just like move the arm, but the whole puppet has to sort of pitch and go. And he sort of lunges the fake and, the fake death at the end. And so there is a compensation for what the arm has to do with the rest of the puppet. But I find, generally speaking, that I don't have to do that. Like, it's pretty, as long as I'm got my eye focused right and the posture and the lip sync and everything, the hands just kind of fall into place, unless there's, like I said, something very specific that they have to do, like that motion.
Yeah, it looks so good, man. It's just so natural.
Oh,
I couldn't even believe it when I was watching it. I couldn't.
Thanks. And it's, I guess it's kind of a marionette idea. Even though there would be a separate control for the hands in that way, but I think a lot of times if those hands aren't controlled or whatever, even by the main control, then they're just kind of there. Not that they're not moving, they're not static, but they're not necessarily controlled. So,
well, shall we go back in time a little bit?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Let's go back further. Yeah, because we only went back to the college age, But let's go back. Let's go back further. What were you doing before puppetry?
Was there life for David Stevens?
Crawling.
Puppetry.
Crawling. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I see you're an artist too. I see a lot of your sketches and stuff that you post online and whatnot. And you're an artist of many other abilities as well. So
I don't really remember a time when I was not influenced by the Muppets. Like they were there from the get-go. My earliest memories as a kid have to do with watching Sesame Street, watching the Muppets. So they were definitely a focal point for my being inspired. And it's funny, my mother saved everything, that like all my school papers and all this stuff. So when they were cleaning out their attic, they had all these boxes that had papers of mine that went back to preschool. And I could see it then, as far as like, I don't know if you guys did this when you were kids, but we'd have the piece of paper that was separated into two sections. You had the line part at the bottom where you were to write out the writing exercise, and then at the top part you'd have the picture where you had to draw a picture based on whatever it was the writing exercise was about.
Mhm.
And I could see little hints going back and looking through all this stuff. There were little hints of like humor and cartooning that were coming through, and you know, my snowmen had a cartoon characterness about them, and or sometimes they'd have, you know, word bubbles. So it was interesting to see that was there, like the foundation for the stuff that I'm doing now was being laid that early on. I'm glad she really saved all that stuff because it was a nice little peek into like what I certainly don't have memory of. But the Muppets, certainly, I remember the first time I lied to my mother was about the Muppets because she had taken me to church on Wednesday night, and I did not want to go to church. I wanted to watch the Muppet Show, and so I faked being sick, and I told her I was sick and I didn't feel good and I needed to go home, and she fell for it, and we got home, and because I was 4 or 5, whatever, I had no concept of time or the passage of. So we got home and she turned on the television. The credits were running. So that was karma, instant karma. But yeah,
well,
I
you can
vividly
watch
remember
TV
that.
when you're sick, though, can't you? That's the excuse I would have made.
Well, not when you're fake sick. I think that was the thing. Where I grew up, we did not have cable, so I grew up right at the tail end of when the Muppets were coming on weekly, and they had just, I think TBS was running them in syndication, and this was before they were on TNT, because TNT was running Muppet Show and Fraggle Rock in sort of the mid '90s, I guess. And so this was before all that. So we had the 3 network stations and UHF.
So for all you kids out there that don't understand what that is,
3 channels and a couple of UHF, and so the Muppets would come on at 5:30 Saturday mornings on one of the UHF stations, which was always bad reception. So I was up 5:30 to watch Kenny Rogers, I remember, and my poor long-suffering parents. I would run into their bedroom and be like, Kenny Rogers is on the Muppet Show, and I would just be ecstatic, and they would, huh, what? Go. So, and it's funny thinking about the way that I was exposed and whatever I could get. It sounds the same as like when people discovered the Grand Ole Opry on the radio. You'd hear these people that would, you know, charge up their car battery, and that would be they parked the truck or whatever on the hill, and that was the only way they could get the reception to hear the Grand Ole Opry. It was kind of that attitude that I had about it, that I was absorbing and taking in whatever I could whenever I could, because stuff was just so limited. And I'd go to visit my grandparents in the summer, and my grandmother had HBO. I don't know if she stole it or if it was just a fluke, but she had it. She didn't pay for it. And that was the one chance I got to see the Fraggles in the summer. And sometimes I'd get one, or most of the time I'd get one episode, and sometimes I'd get 2. And she also had Nickelodeon, which was running things like Pinwheel and Today's Special and Eureka's Castle at that time. So I was like soaking up. I think my parents really worried about me because I was watching all this television, but it was the only access I had to puppets, which is really what I was trying to get at.
Did you know consciously at that point that it was more so the Muppets than those other kinds of puppetry, which were certainly Muppet style, or was it at that point, was it all just puppets to you?
I knew the distinction. even if I remember there was a lady who used to babysit for me, and I didn't care about the rest of Sesame Street. The rest of Sesame Street was fluff to me. I just wanted the Muppet parts, but I didn't know how to communicate that. And so I would tell her, would you call me when the funny parts come on? That's literally what I said to her. Call me when the funny parts come on, because I didn't know how, I don't know that I had puppet in my lexicon at that time. But I knew there was a distinction. Like I knew there was that it was this was it. And those guys. And then, I did the thing that I think a lot of us did growing up, is that we try to pick apart. We learned, Grover kind of sounds like Miss Piggy, and kind of sounds like Fozzie, and Kermit and Rolf kind of sound the same, and Ernie, and those characters. So it was then trying to figure out who was doing which character. I think for us puppet nerds, that's what we go through instead of baseball stats.
Yeah.
Because I had all the episodes memorized, I had all that stuff, and could cue in on, even just by looking at how a puppet was manipulated. Like, that's Frank, or that's Jim, or that's whoever it was. So, and then my parents. So when I was in high school, my parents found a copy of Muppets and Men, and I had no idea such a book even existed. But they were in some used bookstore, and they could not wait. Christmas, I think, had just happened, and they could not wait until my birthday, which was in July, or they fabricated a reason to give me this book, because they were so excited that I should have it, and they knew what it would mean to me. And I did. I took it to school every day, and I pored over those pictures, and I read the text, but it was just really dissecting all of those photographs, and like, well, are they going to show some stuff about how they make these things? And, that's how they did that, or that's who's doing this, or whatever. And it was just like, I needed that, so hungry for more information about how all of that was done. Because, and this is probably true for you, we all have friends that like that stuff, but they grew out of it. And there was a point where it's like, well, I liked it as when I was 5, but then we're looking at the stuff that we're focusing in on the how, not so much on its face value level. So having that book was just an amazing resource for me as a kid, and I was never without it. Like it is definitely well loved.
I know what you mean. I found a copy of Jim Henson's The Works when I was in 6th grade, and I had the same. I didn't even know of Muppets and Men existed, but I had the other one for years and years and years.
Yeah,
again, very well loved. So when about did you really start to then your love and knowledge of what you were accumulating about the Muppets and of puppetry, and start to branch out yourself doing it and making your own shows?
Yeah, more than just fandom.
Probably when I was about, I think I was in 6th grade, and I had this desire to make puppets. Like I was not happy with toys, because that's all you had access to. It seemed like there were either toys you bought at the gift shop, or there were puppet productions, like Christian company made at the time, I think around $100 each, puppets that you'd order from a catalog. And they were streamlined. They were definitely factory made, that were Muppet-esque. They certainly had moving mouths, but they were stiff as all get out. And they were all kind of the same cookie cutter. They had different faces or whatever, but it was all the same puppet. And there was just a desire that I had to make my own characters. Like I had this stuff in my head, and I wanted to make a thing out of it. And so I had a neighbor who was a seamstress, and her name was Elsie Lipscomb. And I would go to her house, and we figured it out together. We took one of those Puppet Productions puppets, and we didn't take it apart, but she kind of figured out how to pattern it or whatever. And this was not even using foam. Like I had no cognizance of using foam rubber till much later. So she would take the fabric parts, and she'd sew those together, and we'd sort of make up a pattern. And then we'd just stuff it with like fiber fill and everything. So, and those are my first puppets. We're making puppets that way. And she did all that for about a year, doing the sewing for me. She was also kind of like a surrogate grandma to me as well. Like she was very influential in that way. But then my mother had a sewing machine, and I thought, well, I'm going to try this myself. And so I guess I was in 7th grade or something like that, and tried. And oh, my puppets are horrible. Oh, they were awful.
Yeah.
Just like, ugh. But I loved them because I made something. Like I took something that I had either doodled or was just in here, and had made a 3-dimensional. Oh, look, it's on my hand. Well, there it is. It's a thing. Like it's a character. And so even though they were really rough for a long time, they were still, like, it was still magical to me that I was able to somehow figure this out without see, what you guys had that I didn't have was what we're on right now, a platform of social media, of internet, of YouTube, of podcast. Like there is a wealth of information that was just not in existence. If you wanted to know something, if you wanted to do it, you had to either figure it out for yourself, or you had to bug the stew out of somebody until they were like, okay, kid, come on. And those were your options. Now there is just like the learning curve is so much greater because there is so much more information that's immediately available. I wish I'd had this when I was that age. How much better would I be now if I had all of that stuff then? I think there's a trade-off. I'm a lot, for one thing, I'm grateful I didn't have all this stuff to show off bad work. I'm glad I did not use any of social media as a platform on which to evolve. Not to say that I don't evolve now, but most of that foundation had already been laid by the time this stuff was into play.
Right.
So I'm glad I did not have an audience for, or an international audience for that period of growth. And I think I definitely appreciate those that took the time to show me things and to teach me, like Miss Elsie, and then Terry Snyder later on, who was my mentor for 20 years. He was the one that sort of got me into working with foam rubber because he'd gone to Gray Seal, he'd gone to Drew Allison and Donald Devitt and said, show me how to do this foam rubber stuff. And I think they had just come out with the foam book, and they sort of guided him through basic foam rubber techniques. And then I learned from Terry based on their stuff. So yeah, I appreciate that apprenticeship model, as well as like the formal training I got at UConn, and then the self-taught stuff that I did on my own. But yeah, it's a different time just because the available information, that's like, click, there it is.
Right.
Which is awesome. It's amazing.
So yeah, I think you earn it more a little bit back in, before all this existed. It's a wonderful tool, but like you said, you really had to take the time to find it out, and you kind of have more ownership of it in a way.
I think there's a natural weeding process in that way, because unless you're determined, it's like in any field. They say if there's anything you can ever imagine yourself doing, go do that. And that was very much true, because you really had to have that sort of stick-to-itiveness and that determination that to see it through if you were gonna stay with it, even past the point of just like being an enthusiast. So if you were going to take it to that next level, then you were really committing to this relationship with this art form.
So then from that point, before you went to UConn, like at what point did you realize that you wanted to do that, like go to UConn or study puppetry further professionally?
I started going to puppet festivals in '92. I think my first festival was the Southeast Regional in Charleston, and then my first national was the one in San Francisco, and that came about, well, because of the one I'd gone to the previous, putting together this youth scholarship program. And I was one of the first people to get a scholarship to go to a P of A festival, was to that one in San Francisco. And that was just like, going! Because Mike Osnowicz was the artistic director, Frank Oz's dad, and he called in favors from everybody. And it was really an international festival. As much as people talk about the 1980 World Congress, Unimo World Congress, for me, my version of that was the '93 festival in San Francisco, because you had Hank Borwinkle, you had Hugo and Inez, Frank was there, you had Brad Brewer and the Crotations. You had this amazing mix of international and American puppetry that was just unprecedented, really, since that 1980 festival, which I wasn't around for. But so that really opened my eyes, and it was through and that was the festival where I met Bart, because Letty had put that festival together. Bart was going to come and see our young performer workshop, and I think they had originally scheduled 2 slots, but they only did 1 slot. And Bart was going to come to the second one and missed it. But I had breakfast with him, and I had a bag of puppets and brought out the puppets. And my dad was there with me because I was 16 at the time, so we traveled out there together. So, and Bart at the end of that breakfast was basically like, whenever you want to come to the program, you've got a place. So as much as I wanted to go there as an undergraduate, the money just wasn't there. There wasn't really a scholarship for me, and we certainly couldn't afford it on our own. So I got a scholarship to an in-state school for my undergraduate degree, and I did 4 years at Troy University in Troy, Alabama. And they had a children's theater troupe that was part of their dramatic arts department, which was great because it showed me what touring was like. So we were set up on the quarter system at the time, which meant we had the time from Thanksgiving till basically after New Year's off. And so we would tour those 2 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas to different schools in Alabama. And there were, I think, 7 or 8 of us in that troupe. And we would do fairy tales and folk tales, sort of kids theater way. Very minimal, too. No sets, no nothing. We would assume set piece parts for, the 3 Little Pigs, a couple of us, and all this kind of stuff. So it was very minimal theater at the time for that troupe, which was a great learning experience. And I also found my own opportunities when I was there. I approached the broadcast journalism department and said, I want to do some puppet stuff on television. And they all just kind of looked at me and I said, okay. So like into freshman year, we put together a little pilot called the TSU Puppet Review. And TSU was Troy State University at the time. They changed since to Troy University. And it was really weird. We had talked about doing more of those, but it was just really time consuming too. But I grabbed in like some of the other theater majors to do some of the other puppets. And it was interesting putting that together. Like I'd never really tried to put together a whole like kind of thing. And it was interesting. And then I did her stuff. But then at the time in the summers, I was also starting to do the library stuff. So all this kind of morphed and happened at the same time.
So before that, you were focused on monitor puppetry? Would you say, getting into that?
I wanted to be.
Yeah.
That's
not everybody wants.
We didn't have a camcorder. I remember there was a guy in my neighborhood that had one, and every once in a while I'd go over to his house and I'd borrow it, and I'd hook it up to a television, and do that kind of stuff. But I didn't have access on a daily basis to doing that. I'd done it enough that I felt okay with it when I went to the broadcast journalism department to want to put together that pilot.
Yeah.
And then there was Williams, who was a great musician and as much of a devotee of Jim Henson. He was that much of a devotee of Fred Rogers, and he and Fred became friends. And so Art was trying to put together his own kind of kids show. And so we combined our talents, and I contributed puppets to a project he was working on. So I had some limited television experience by the time I was out of college. Enough to send a message to Carol Spinney. I didn't know where to send a tape. Like I was absolutely out of it as far as knowing anything. But Carol's address was in the P of A directory. And I just sent him a tape and I said, here's some stuff. And I have it. It's one of my treasured, valuable possessions. It's a little envelope with Big Bird on the front of it, and a nice letter from Carol that was basically, he had watched the tape and, said basically, here's some things you maybe look at. And then, Henson is looking for people all the time. So send a tape to here. And nice, and put a couple of postcards, and he caroled it up, so which was awesome. And then it was a nice. He didn't have to do that. I mean, he really didn't have to do that, and it meant a lot that he took the time and he did do that. So I think I might have sent a tape to Henson. My involvement with any of that stuff didn't happen until much later. Heather Henson came to the Center for Puppetry Arts after I'd started. It may have been my first run there, and I didn't know she was there. My friend Bob Nathanson had said he was going to be at the show, and so when the stage manager came backstage and said, "There's somebody here to see you," and I thought, well, it's Bob. And I go out and it's Heather Henson. And I'd met Heather once at that point, I think at the festival at Bryn Mawr. And I was not expecting that. And then she came out and she said, "Your voices are just like my dad. I love it." And I was like, that could have gone a completely different way. And that was sort of the beginning of that stuff. And then Disney was looking for people, and I sort of got involved in that. A bit of controversy for a half a minute when it was still on the table that Disney was looking for supplemental performers, shall we say. And then I did a Sesame workshop around the same time, because while Disney was looking for people, Kevin was also looking at people, I think just so they could know who was out there, because I think it had been a long time since they'd done any of those cattle calls to know what talent was spread out all over the place. And so he conducted a Sesame workshop, I think it was 2006. And I did that, and it was like the middle of that week that my gut was like, "You need to move to New York." And I was like, "But they're not offering any jobs. They outright said, we're not hiring anyone." And my gut was like, "You need to move to New York." And within a month, I did. It was the most ridiculous thing I think I'd ever done. And I specifically sought out people who'd done what I was proposing to do, because I wanted them to talk me out of it. I really wanted them to say, "No, you're better off here. You're fine. You got a good company, and you don't need to. You're fine. Just don't go anywhere." And every one of them had my bags packed and said, "Get out of here." And so I did. I moved with like $1,500 in my account and 2 suitcases and a banjo. I mean, if you want to talk about like the Muppet movie, here you go. I mean, this is it. A man, his banjo, and his dreams of being a TV puppeteer. And that's kind of what it was. And I worked for a second season on Seymour's Playhouse with Eric Wright and Sarah Fichette and Z Briggs, and Frankie Cordero was our puppet captain. David Fino was also on that show. And that was my first submersion into TV puppetry, where I was working every day. And I know I got better because I had that exposure to doing that stuff every day.
Right.
And I had the time of my life. I really did. I was thrilled because the difference, and I'm sorry if I'm being really long-winded here, but this sort of touches on some stuff. When I have my own company, I'm doing everything. I'm wearing all the hats. I'm building the show, designing the show, writing the show, performing the show, directing the show, booking the show, dealing with all the business stuff that goes with it. So I have to wear all the hats. In that world, I just got to be a performer. And it was so awesome to have that one responsibility, that I could focus on not doing everything and not doing all the characters, but doing one character. And it was just so, and I, could really hone in and become a better performer because that was my only responsibility. And so that was, I think we shot 8 weeks of that second season, and it wrapped, it was done. And then I got a call from Sesame about season 39. So I was the utility puppeteer for season 39. It was 2 episodes. I did an Anything Muppet and Baby Bear's birthday, Curly Bear's birthday, somebody's birthday. I can't. And then I was the cow in Elmo. I think is Elmo Help Super Grover or something like that. And then there were a couple of other direct to video things that I did. I know I was Telly's right hand for, I think it was Think Green. They were in a phone bank was Telly and Rosita, and was it Baby Bear? I think I can't remember now, or Cookie. It was Cookie, because I have a piece of the phone. So they had like 3 immaculate prop telephones for Cookie to like demolish and eat up, and I got one of the cradles for the receiver that he demolished. So yeah, and it was an Anything Muppet of Jerry for, I think it was Family Stand Together. I think that was the title of it. But they had a Muppet of Jerry, and Matt performed him part of the time, and then I performed him for the other part of the time. And that was, yeah, it was kind of the extent of what I did. And just like my gut said, you mean to move to New York? The city was also, well, it's been fun. I think you should go back to Atlanta now. It's tough. I applaud all those puppeteers who stick it out and make it in that town, because, yeah, boy, it's not cheap to live there at all. You're hustling all the time. As much as I have to hustle with my own company, you really have to hustle to make things work and piece it together when you're a puppeteer, in that sort of nebulous world of like, well, I'm not a character that appears all the time, but I'm good enough to be a part of this. And that's the struggle. It's like you're sort of in this collective group of which there's a lot of people that are competent and good enough to be a part of that talent pool, but then making that, bridging that gap of like, I want to be here doing this, to like, well, now I have some, sense of security because I'm a character or I'm called all the time or whatever. And I just didn't have that assurance. I didn't know if I was going to get more work in season 40 or any work in season 40 or the same amount of work in season 40. And 2 of those options were not going to allow me to pay the rent. So that was also a reality, that you have to live, you do have to exist. So as much as I loved it, and I did love it, like there is no greater feeling in this world than getting a contract with Sesame Street characters on it that says you're working for us, and then going to that set and being around some of the most talented people in this business, and being a part of that, and being accepted as them saying you're good enough to be here too, and that's really powerful stuff, because you tell 6-year-old me you're enthralled with this stuff, one day you're going to work there, and it's not forever. It's not your life. You're not going to wind up being there every day, but you're going to get there, and you're going to have that experience. I don't think I would have ever thought that as a kid in South Alabama I would have gone to that. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think one thing that you mentioned that'll stick out to a lot of people and resonate with them was that you saying about how nice it was to play one character and not have to focus with all those aspects of the business. And I bet you there's going to be a lot of people sitting there listening to that saying, yeah, me too. That's what I want to do. But I think good thing to point out is you got there by doing all that yourself first. That's what kind of gave you the skills to be able to get there. So it's not just going to fall in your lap or getting lucky.
Well, don't underestimate the power of luck in any of that.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, there is a lot of luck involved too. But it takes hard work with a little bit of luck to get the yeah. Good point.
You have to have the goods.
Yeah.
You have to have the goods to be there.
Yeah.
And to get there, and then I had my own bit of luck as being a part of that, because the Hensons have definitely been cheerleaders for me as my own work. And then when I was a part of that stuff, I know my involvement with the Emmet Otter musical was definitely was supported by them, and it just seemed like a natural fit. I'll tell that story too. So I had just moved back to Atlanta, feeling a little like, well, I guess that didn't really work out the way I wanted it to. I was, whatever. And then they had this announcement for auditions for this Emmet Otter musical, and I was like, well, I just left New York. I gotta figure out what I'm doing here. And then it was Paul McGinnis who called me, and he said, if ever there was a musical with your name on it, this is the one.
There's a
You get
puppet
your butt
that
up
plays
here.
a banjo.
So I did. I went on the plane and I took the banjo, and I went into I don't know where it was, the audition, and I think it was one of the Monkey Boys. I came in the room and they saw me and they said, well, we might as well all go home. Which was flattering, but it's like, please. If I've learned anything about this world, it's like there's nothing in the bag. And then there was Marty was there. I think he was a rep for Henson that was helping Christopher Gattelli, the director, with casting. And there were a couple of other Henson folks that I knew. And it was Christopher Gattelli and Tim McDonald, who was the book writer, and so Broadway people. And I had no idea. I had prepared a couple of things because it's like when you go into this world, they want to know that you have some competence. So it's good that you come in with a prepared piece of established music so that they can tell, there's something to judge by. So I think I prepared something from Big River, and I think something from the Robber Bridegroom. And then I was, had the banjo, but I was either going to let the accompanist do that, or I couldn't decide. And somebody said, just go in there and play the banjo and whatever. So I thought, okay, I'll just go in and play my song about biscuits and gravy. And so I walk in and they're like filling out the forms and, doing all this official stuff. And then I start playing the banjo and singing biscuits and gravy, and they all do this. And it was like, it was a revelation. And so that was how I got to be a part of Emmet, was that. And it was a great experience to get to work with Paul Williams and Christopher and Tim. And Tyler was our puppet captain the first year. And that was great. Like Tyler and I have been really good friends for a long time now. And then he couldn't do it the second year. And I'll never forget, we were talking on the phone, and I was just like, well, who are they going to get to be the puppet captain now that because I think he was doing the second season, or what was supposed to have been the second season of Big Big World. And so he was out of the show entirely. And we were just like, who are they going to get? And he knew, but he didn't say anything. And they called me and asked me to be the puppet captain the next year. And it was just like, okay. And that year they would also try to reduce the cast number by 2 males. So I was like, well, so one was the Lizard, was an actor in a costume, and the other was Pa Otter. Came back in a ghost thing and had a beautiful ballad that Paul had written especially for this character. And it's like, well, who are they going to get to absorb that?
Nice.
So I had to be the puppet captain. I absorbed 2 acting roles, and besides all the puppet stuff, I was Yancey Woodchuck. And we had this quartet of squirrels that were transitional characters to the whole thing too. So there were times in that show I was in part of one costume, part of another costume, doing a puppet from the pit. I mean, it was really crazy, that whole project, but it was great. It was great fun to do.
How long was the run for that?
We did it 2 years, 2008 and 2009. So I think we started just after Thanksgiving or around Thanksgiving each year, and then it carried to New Year's, just after New Year's.
This
So
was
it was
the
great.
Big Screen Opera House.
Yeah, in East Haddam,
Connecticut.
Connecticut. And
Yeah.
if you ever visit there, it's idyllic, and it was the perfect backdrop for Emmet because the whole town looks like Waterville, like it really does. And the Opera House looks, like it could have been the town hall for the talent show. It really was that sort of idyllic. It was just like a postcard, and it was the perfect place for that show. I hope something will happen. I think there are rights available now to it for it to be able to be done or produced by other theaters. I think that's finally happened. But
Really?
it would be great. Yeah, it would be great if something happened with that show because it's so great. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah, I had the opportunity to see they just re-released Emmet in theaters this past Christmas time, and to see that on the big screen in a room full of people who knew all the lines, and to hear everyone laughing at the same time. Usually it's my sister and me watching it in our living room, and to be able to share that experience with a theater filled with people was really, really cool. So I could only imagine if you're seeing a live version of the show, it must just be something really special.
Right. Well, and that it was extended too. So Tim basically took that 50-minute, 45-minute teleplay, and they had to make a 2-hour show out of it with an intermission. So it was really, I think the intention was that it was going, I think they had Broadway or New York ambitions for that show, which would have been nice that it had done that. But so they really took the staged, the theatrical approach to making this thing a whole. And there was a great opening number about Waterville that was just really, it was theater, buddy. And there was a song, and Paul wrote new material specifically for the show. There was one about the music store. They made a whole character out of Mrs. Mink, who's the little lady, the uptight lady, and then finished the song that he had initially wrote for the talent show for her. And she burlesqued the hell out of that. It was great. It was wonderful. And then we had a live band every night too. So because all the puppets were in the orchestra pit, I think that a lot of people thought the music was canned, like it was pre-recorded. And then at the end of the show, during the bows, they would raise the cyc, and the band was behind the cyc on a platform, and it was just like, whoa, real people playing all that music. It was really great. It was really awesome.
That's so cool.
I missed the theatrical release this year of the Emmet shows because I had to do Christmas puppet shows, but I really wanted to do that, to see it with people who aren't puppet people. I don't know if you find this to be true, but it's easy to look through this lens of like, well, I know how they did that, or well, there's that, and it's like, oh, that really is heartwarming. And I'll tell you, even now, I watched it recently with a friend who had never seen it before. River meets the sea every time. It doesn't matter how many times I watch it, how many times I've seen it. Every time. So there's a power and a magic to that. And I think that's why, even though it's been so under the radar for so long, the people that know it are devoted to it, and they'll spread the gospel of that show because it is worth spreading, and it's kind of the show we need right now.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was definitely on my list of things to ask you about. But as we kind of start wrapping up a little bit, one of the things that we always ask people who come on Puppeteers, if you have a sort of favorite.
The Bumpus of dogs.
Those are dogs.
Someone's at the door.
There's a couple dozen of them in Adam's house.
Yeah. It's one of their birthdays today too.
Anyhow, something that we always ask people is if they have a funny puppeteer story that they don't at the time was maybe something that was frustrating or crazy, of something that went wrong, but now with some hindsight that we're able to kind of share and enjoy. Any really fun, crazy stories that you like to tell people about?
I'll tell this story. So there was so down in some of the schools down here, the gingerbread man is part of their curriculum, and they'll approach different versions of the story so that kids see how different authors and illustrators will approach the same subject or the same theme. And so I had been booked. Well, there's two stories. So the school had booked me to do Gingerbread Man. And I don't know if I was just having an off day or what, but I got to the school and I realized I'd packed the wrong show. Like I'd put the wrong trunk of puppets in the car. And I thought, well, it's fairy tales. What's the difference? And so I said, well, I'm sorry, but I packed this show, and thinking, well, I'm here. I'll just. And she was like, oh no, this is part of our curriculum. Like, so fortunately, I was able to come back the next day, but it was like, whoops. And the other story that's kind of similar. So there's one Atlanta tourist spot in town that for a long time booked my Christmas show every Saturday in December, so I would be there 4 weeks. And so I would do this show. And even when I was in New York, I had Jason Hines. He learned the show and he did the show when I couldn't do the show, which was funny. I always wanted to see him do that show. So one year, and I would move back to Atlanta, and the first Saturday of December had passed, and I hadn't got a call to book it. So I was like, well, I guess I'll book some other stuff. So I booked some local theaters, some that had been wanting me for a long time, but I never was able to do it because I was always booked. And so the first Saturday went by and I did my show. And in the middle of the week, I got this call and they said, from this place, and they said, are you the guy that normally does the Christmas shows? And I said, yeah, I have in the past. I said, but nobody called to book me this year. And they said, oh, well, can you come next week? And I said, yeah, I guess I'm free next week, but the other two are already booked. And it turns out that they had promoted my being there without ever having actually booked me.
Oh my God.
Oh no! Oh boy! Oh man! When Google News Alert would have helped out a little bit.
Right. Right.
How close was that to you? I could see you driving down, like seeing a billboard. Oh, look! Wait a minute.
Well, there wasn't any. It wasn't public. Like it was just internally within this attraction.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
it was like in your printed material and all that stuff, but it wasn't like, as far as I know, there wasn't any like broadcast promotion. Because this was what they did in conjunction with like some of the things that were Christmas themed going on in this place. But yeah, it was nuts. It was crazy. Like,
holy cow!
better work that out in marketing, or whatever. If your event coordinator. Woo!
Seriously.
Oh my gosh.
At least they didn't call in January.
Yeah. And then the kicker is then you got there and you accidentally packed the Halloween show, right?
Right, exactly. Well, that's the kind of thing you worry about too, and that the public doesn't know that it was their snafu.
Yeah.
For all they know, you're the guy that just didn't show up.
Right.
So these are all those kinds of weird things that you kind of have to be on top of because they don't know. There's not going to be an official retraction or statement saying it was the fault of this organization why the puppeteer wasn't there. I just look like the guy that didn't show up. So that's the kind of stuff that you have to be cognizant and careful of. It's like, but it wasn't my fault. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
tricky, this business.
Without a doubt. Well, for people who do want to book you,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. How
find
can
you out,
people, what's the best way to get in contact with you if anyone wants to reach out, or the best way to follow other projects that you're working on?
You can find me on my website, allhandsproductions.com. I'm also on Facebook as David Stevens, or you can also like the All Hands Productions Facebook page. I'm also on Instagram as All Hands Productions, and I, post a lot of pictures of puppets. There's dumb videos with Chubbly or whatever, banjo stuff as well. So just be warned that if you get involved in the puppet stuff, the banjo stuff comes along with it. So
Yeah, I was looking at your YouTube channel earlier, and I saw a bunch of the banjo videos, which is pretty cool.
yeah, I'm sort of playing with that now and sort of rediscovering some older stuff that I wrote a long time ago and remembering, well, these songs are actually pretty good. So yeah, I'm probably doing stuff now that I should have done a long time ago, but it's fun to sort of pull those out.
Am I wrong? I feel like I've seen before that some of your old productions are on YouTube, isn't it? Like the Reluctant Dragon or some of the other ones, Jack and the Beanstalk?
I think the only ones that are not on YouTube are the Christmas show. There may be one other one, but I think the rest are. I think the rest of the shows are on.
Yeah.
They're all live. Most of that is for promotion. Like people want to see the show before they book it or whatever. And it's like,
Sure.
I probably should digest it into clips or whatever.
People should definitely check those out. I'll say there's nothing quite like being there in person, but just to get an idea of what you do, it's a pretty good representation.
Right. And these are they're totally shot in an audience situation, so you have a lot of like ambient children crying. So there's not like great audio or anything, and kind of that's by design. yeah, I didn't want this to be like a slick video production. It's like, no, this is a live experience.
Yeah.
This is so you're hearing. I think it's also important for people who are potentially booking the thing to hear how audiences are responding to the show.
Yeah.
So besides all the stuff that's happening with audiences that don't pertain to the show, hearing how they are reacting and responding to what's being performed is important. Because it's one thing if you have like a clip, a series of clips of just like studio shot, with clean audio and clean picture, and it's like that's one thing to have it that slick, but it's also something else to like, oh, people are actually engaged with this.
Yeah.
So I think that's important too.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt, especially for that market. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I'll say too, I don't have a focus about like trying to appeal to an age demographic. Like I never do that.
Yeah.
Like these are shows that I enjoy performing, and I try to do that old Muppet technique of like writing for levels. It's like you put something in there for the grown-ups, and I hear it time and time again. It's like they're shocked. They are absolutely mystified that they've come to a puppet show with their children and they were entertained. It's like, it's sad that we've lost that. It's sad that now that there's this assumption that because I take my 2-year-old or my 5-year-old to the show, I'm just gonna like phone it in or be on my phone, and I'm not gonna. There's not gonna be anything for me.
Oh,
And it's like I think if I have any sort of mission statement or policy or whatever, it's that no, this is for everybody. Like this is for you as much as it is for your children because you're here. Why would I want to exclude you? And you're going to pay for it. So it's
no, that's nice. Yeah. Well, you can do that at the libraries. I know when I'm doing magic shows, I've had that same experience. The parents always enjoy it too, but also doing birthday parties. The one time the parents, they had the party down in the basement go set it up in the basement. I'm like, okay, great. And then they send all the kids down and there's no adults at all. So it's pretty much I was babysitting. I was like, okay. So I set up my show and I went up to use the restroom. They locked us in the basement. They didn't want the kids coming up to disturb the parents because they were all like chatting. They locked me in the basement with the kids.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I'll never forget that.
I did a birthday party once where they sent Grandpa down to the basement to watch me set up to make sure I didn't steal anything.
Oh gosh.
Wow, that's pretty funny too.
Yeah, it's like he was trying to make idle chit chat and all this kind of stuff to seem like interested in what I was doing, but then I caught on later. It's like, you're just trying to make sure I don't take anything from down here, aren't you? It's like,
oh gosh, yeah.
Goodness.
I don't miss that hustle anymore. I still do those shows every once in a while, but I do not promote it. So it's like,
yeah, that's the thing. It's like I don't do a different show for birthday parties. Like it's the same setup, it's the same show. In fact, and I don't charge any less because to do a private show in somebody's home, at least in my mind, is a premium service.
Yeah.
Like that's something special. You don't expect to pay less when you hire a band for your wedding. In fact, you pretty much assume that you're going to pay double what they would normally get at a regular gig. So it's like that's the thing. It's like the same experience you just had at this library or this neutral place is what I'm going to bring to your home. And it's like I'm not going to cater to that market by designing the $150 quick setup tabletop birthday party show. I've thought about it like as a, maybe that's something I should jump on, but then it's like, then that's all you do. If that's what you create, then that's all you're going to be doing.
yeah.
So it's like I much enjoy those neutral places where I don't have to worry about messing up your floor, and you don't have to worry about me stealing the antiquities. So we all get to come to the library. We all get to come to the whatever, the theater space, the art gallery, the whatever, and we all have a shared, combined experience together. That's a place that's not your home, whatever. So, but if you want me to do that, well, I'll do it. But it's it's the same experience. I'm offering you the same experience that you're going to get anywhere at another venue.
But
so,
David, we're non for profit.
anytime I always heard the best answer or response I ever heard to, well, you'll get exposure. It's like people die from exposure.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
right. Oh gosh.
And at this
Oh,
point in my career, there are months where it's like, I got to have something and I'll do it, even if it's not my favorite thing to do. But there are no assurances. This
Yeah.
is not, I have great months and I have slump months. And if anything comes along in November, when everybody's preparing up for Christmas and they don't book anything, I'll take whatever comes in.
Yeah.
It's that hard balance, because yes, you would like to feel like you can say no to things that you would probably rather not do for reasons of integrity or reasons of whatever.
Mhm.
But then you got to pay the rent. You
Yeah.
have to pay the rent. And this is something, unfortunately, that I encounter time and time again, is that people want you to donate or volunteer or your services as a builder, as a performer, as a whatever. And it's like, no. It's like, because yes, this does seem like fun and games. Like it's a fuzzy thing that I'm making you laugh and it's entertaining and well, this must be just so much fun to do. You must just love doing it all the time. Period. It's like I also like having a place to live and indoor plumbing and lights and electricity and the internet by which we can email each other about the thing you want me to come do for free. So,
sorry about that.
yeah, so it's like all those things, they take the same money that you have to pay to have all those things. It's like my reality is no different than yours as far as like what I have to do to make a living.
Yeah.
So yeah, the summer months are great because I'm doing 50 plus shows in 8 weeks. So that's the fat time. But then it's like January, November. So it's tough. It's tough sometimes. And this is like about 25 years in. Like I've been doing this over 20 years, and those things don't change. In fact, it's more. I had a conversation with a person. She asked what I did, and I told her, and she just had this like look of like, that's a real job. Oh, and then I asked what she did, and she had this glazed over look over her face, and she said, I work in payroll. I take out people's medical benefits out of their paycheck. And I said, do you have paid vacation? I said, do you have paid sick days? Do you have health benefits? Do you have a retirement policy? Yes, 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 and yes. And I said, you're lucky.
Yeah.
And it's the grass is greener.
Right.
There's always a trade-off for all of this being able to do what I want to do as a job. There are trade-offs, and that people who sacrifice, maybe they don't feel as fulfilled with what they do for a living, but there are other things that they're getting out of it, that are realities for me that I have anxiety issues about.
Yeah.
So, and I told her there would always be a need for her job because there will always be people getting paychecks in some form or fashion. For me, and a lot of us in this business who are solo puppeteers or small entities, it all depends on the funding. At any moment, if funding for some of these institutions or entities dries up, I guess I'm just going to take my banjo and play on the street corner.
Yeah.
Those are your options, because it's not one pay source. You've got libraries, you've got Friends of the Library, you've got private, entities that are funding, the PTO organization. You have all of these different sources for where that money comes from that allow you to be able to come in and do your show. Now, I'll say on the flip side, I think there will always be a need and a desire to have a live theater experience. I think there will always be audiences who want to have that. So if I have any sort of job assurance, that's it. That people will want to have those live experiences, whether it be at a puppet show or a theater or whatever. So I don't think the opportunities will necessarily disappear, but I find as things go along, they change.
Yep.
And they recontextualize. I mean, like quarterly, I do something called Puppet Brunch, where I go to this restaurant in Atlanta and I do my puppet show while people are eating brunch and the parents are drinking mimosas. And it's a lovely time. It's like breakfast theater. And I never would have thought that would have been a model. And it's like, this is pretty good, because for $7 you get your show ticket. The restaurant gets to make money. I get my fee, and they get a puppet show, and then they get to go about their day. When you commit to doing something like going to the Center for Puppetry Arts, which is a great commitment, by the way, you want to have the day, like you want to take in the museum because you paid the ticket, so you want the show, you want the museum, you want to do all of it. And here it's just like, we can go have breakfast, we can see the puppet show, and now we're nap time. It's nap time, so we're gonna go take a nap. Yeah. So it's nice to offer that as an option, that it's not requiring your whole day, or you feel like you need to get your money's worth out of it. So.
Well, David Stevens, thank you so much for sharing all of your work and for.
Oh, you don't have any more questions for me? What?
That'll be on the next episode, Jubbly.
You'll have you on next time.
Good. I don't want him in my interview. I'll do this.
Well, yeah, we'll do all Jubbly.
Joe. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, Jubbly.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Bye.